Magnus Carlsen, the #1 rated chess player on the planet Earth, just sacrificed his knight on move 4 in a rated tournament game. Why? To play the Cochrane Gambit. What is the Cochrane Gambit? We'll run through the game from move 1. Magnus Carlsen is the white pieces, rated 2882 at the time of this game. Yu Yangyi is 2752, playing the black pieces. This is a 5-minute game. Carlsen starts e4, e5, knight f3, the king's knight opening, and we have the Petroff defense with knight f6. Magnus takes the pawn, by far the most common move at the grandmaster level. Basically everyone here plays d6 at the highest level. Knight takes e4, significantly worse for black. Knight c6 leads to the Stafford. Yu Yangyi opts for the most common, d6. And if we look at the Masters database, 96% of players play knight f3, retreating their knight. 2% of players retreat their knight to c4, which is a very tricky sideline. 190 players have played knight d3. And then 1% of games, 172 players have played this in a rated game, take the pawn on f7 with their knight. This is known as the Cochrane Gambit, and it has a shockingly good win rate at the master level. So first I want to talk about whether or not the Cochrane Gambit is any good. You'll see the engine says minus 0.5. In the Cochrane Gambit, we end up trading the knight for 2 pawns, so we're effectively down 1 point of material. So the engine saying it's minus 0.5 is effectively saying that we have half a point of compensation for our sacrifice. But keep in mind that chess engines are notoriously extremely bad at understanding long-term sacrifices, especially long-term positional sacrifices, like sacrificing a knight on f7 in order to get the king out. Also keep in mind that engine evaluations are based on the engine playing itself. In an actual game with humans, there are several more factors to consider. One of the fundamental rules, one of the fundamental truths of practical chess is that attacking in chess is easier than defending in chess, because making threats is easier than defending against them. But obviously, if you're a chess engine, you're playing against the chess engine, that's what you're basing your analysis off, and you're going to defend everything perfectly. It's all the same, it doesn't matter if your king's in danger because you can see 30, 40 moves ahead. Another extremely important practical consideration is the psychological pressure, the psychological advantage playing a gambit like this gives you. If you've played a lot of gambits or risky attacking openings, you would know that usually when you win, it's some crazy checkmate in the middle game and you look like a genius. But if you lose, you're usually down a pawn or two in an endgame and it's sort of slow and boring and goes to move 50 or 60. Now, keeping that in mind, I want you to imagine that, like in this case, Magnus Carlsen just sacrificed his knight against you on move 4. You immediately know that if he wins, this is going to be everywhere on the internet. Playing gambits in chess gives you a massive psychological advantage. Yu Yangyi of course accepts the gambit, the only reasonable move. Magnus plays d4. The other common line is knight c3. I do think d4 is a lot trickier. Lichess calls this the center variation. And Yu Yangyi plays by far the best move, c5. Definitely a favorite of grandmasters, I would imagine. Worth mentioning here, the most common move at the amateur level is taking the e4 pawn, which loses immediately. You have a series of checks, starting with queen h5 check. From here, if they play g6, we have another check, winning back the piece, and now we're up a pawn and their king's in the open. Magnus plays knight c3. And in this position, I sort of want to stop and reflect on why I sort of decided to cover this game, and why this sort of curiosity of a game I think speaks so much to the current state of the metagame in chess. I'm sure you've noticed if you've followed any Grandmaster chess or any World Championships that people don't really take risks in the opening anymore, at least at the highest level. And you may be wondering why that is when you consider that in terms of practical consideration, like I was just saying, attacking is a lot easier than defending. And largely I do blame this on chess engines. I think that with chess engines we've discovered much better defensive resources to openings that were more commonplace in the romantic era of chess, like the King's Gambit. The engine, for example, is incredible at finding these subtle defensive moves like an early a6 or h6 to defuse the opponent's attack. But almost more importantly, grandmasters, when they're under attack but up material, are so good at trading off their pieces, it is insane. Full disclosure, I'm rated about 2000 online, and even in my games, most of the games that I find myself losing, especially against higher rated players, I play a lot of sharp, sacrificial openings, and usually they end up a pawn or 2 pawns up. They trade all the pieces off and they simply win the endgame. And why I think this game is so good as an instructional game and a game to study is because Yu Yangyi really performs a masterclass here. Magnus Carlsen, the best chess player on earth, sacrificed an entire knight against him, and he diffuses the attack like it's almost nothing. So if you find yourself struggling against really sharp, aggressive openings, this is definitely a great game to study. Yu Yangyi captured the pawn, obviously hoping to develop with tempo and sort of equalize the position. If your opponent sacrifices material to attack you, the first thing you need to focus on is ending the attack. After all, in chess, even if you're up a knight, sure you're winning, but you have to not lose before you can win. That's just common sense. So if someone has already sacrificed an enormous amount of material to attack you, instead of looking for tactical shots or moving pawns in front of your king, what you need to do is play slow, focus on developing, and focus on diffusing your opponent's attacks. Triple check every single check that your opponent has to make sure that you're safe so you can make it into the endgame, because this endgame, obviously, is winning for black. And again, the most crucial part of that is simply trading off and forcing as many trades as possible. That's how you punish this kind of play. Magnus delivers the bishop check. Instead of d5, Magnus comes back to the e8 square. Carlsen captures, and naturally Yu develops with tempo. Now, I have a question for you. What's Yu Yangyi's #1 concern right now? If you answered king safety, like we were just talking about, you are absolutely right. Now a question, if material was even, would this be a neutral equal position? My answer is no. I think white still has a massive lead in development. So what should our focus be on? Getting our king safe and developing, and then once that's been done, we can start focusing on trading pieces. So Magnus retreats to e3, and Yu Yangyi finds the brilliant move, queen b6. Remember our goals here. We want to develop as quickly as possible, we want to get our king safe, and we want to trade off our opponent's attacking pieces. Queen b6 massively evens out our development, and also offers a trade to our opponent, which of course he won't accept, but it wins us another turn because he's going to have to move his king again, and he decides to go to g3. Quick question, would knight e5 be good here, threatening to trade off white's best minor piece? The answer is absolutely not. The order of your priorities when you're being attacked and you're up material should be as follows. Your first concern should be king safety, your second concern should be accelerating development, and your third concern should be trading off pieces. A very, very prolific theme of club level games is very often people will blunder a tactic in the same move that they're trying to trade off an opponent's piece. The reason for this is that they get their priorities mixed up. They haven't developed their pieces yet. Remember, the fundamentals of chess still apply even if you're being attacked. You don't want to move the same piece twice before you finish development. The fact that our opponent sacrificed a piece and we want to trade material really doesn't change that. If you start trying to trade pieces off too early, just like Bobby Fischer would say, tactics will start to flow out of the superior position. In this particular position, obviously our g7 pawn is under attack, so I think I would go for bishop d7 here. When you're a super grandmaster though, you do get to break all the rules, so Yu Yangyi moves his knight again with knight d4. Hypothetically, he'd be threatening to take this pawn, but it would be ill-advised because, as I said before, you're really trying to accelerate your development. You're not trying to capture pawns or trade pieces. White castle is continuing its development, and let's assess the board state. We have 3 pieces developed and a pawn on d6. Our opponent also has 3 pieces developed and a pawn on e4. That being said, our opponent's already castled and their rook's about to come to the center, and our king is unable to castle. It's going to take us at least 1 turn to develop this bishop unless we want to sacrifice this pawn right here. And we still haven't developed our light bishop either. I would say we're still not quite equal. We still need to focus on developing, and then we can focus on trading pieces off. I'm sure a lot of you are eyeing taking this pawn. Let's see why it loses. Bishop g4, knight takes a1, and e5. There is simply too much attack, and our opponent's pieces are too good. Sure, we're up 7 points of material, but like I said earlier, before winning, you have to not lose. The most important thing you can do when your opponent is playing an aggressive gambit system against you is to make sure your king is safe. Material literally does not matter if you're being checkmated. If you take one lesson from this video, I want this to be that lesson. Going back to what actually happened, Yu Yangyi plays bishop e6. This is a brilliant move. Once again, just like the queen moved to b6, what did this accomplish? Not only to develop one of our 2 remaining minor pieces, but it also offered to trade off white's best minor piece. It's accomplishing 2 of our goals at once. Whenever you see one of these moves, where you can develop and offer a trade, it's almost always really good against gambit systems. This is why, if you analyze a lot of gambits that involve sacrificing a c-pawn, the engine loves pinning that knight and then taking that knight. Magnus accepts the trade and Yu Yangyi captures. Let's take another look at the board state. We have both of our knights developed and our queen. Our opponent has 1 knight, their queen, and they've castled. I would say at this point, development is about equal. Both of us have bishops that are locked down to our g and b pawn, respectively. Our king feels fairly safe, especially with this knight covering these light squares. I would say it's about time to start focusing on piece trades. I really don't think white has any compensation anymore. Magnus plays knight d5. And I have another question for you. I just said we're looking for piece trades. Do we trade the piece? The answer should be a very, very obvious no, because it's going to open up our king with tempo. There are openings in chess that are aggressive, like the Smith-Morra, where you're literally willing to sacrifice an entire knight on d5 just in order to open up your opponent's king with tempo. You should not give that advantage to your opponent just to trade off a piece. Now, with that being said, should we take the pawn? After all, it comes with tempo. The answer is no, because once again, it's going to completely open up our king. And this is also an essential thing to understand when you're trying to defend against a hyper-aggressive opening. Yes, trading pieces is a priority, but not if it compromises your king's safety. You can't win a game of chess if you've already been checkmated. King safety is number one. Yu plays the quiet defensive move queen c6, and Magnus captures the knight with check, which actually sort of helps us out. We have queen g4 targeting the knight, and after king e7, our king is not really in any kind of danger anymore. At this point, Yu Yangyi has successfully diffused the Cochrane Gambit. Now he simply has to convert it to a win. Magnus plays bishop d2, and Yu plays h5, another brilliant move. First of all, it comes with tempo. Second of all, it helps us develop our nuisance piece. Instead of retreating, Magnus moves forward to g6. With a very nice tactical move, bishop h6 from Yu Yangyi. If Magnus were to capture, there's a very, very simple removing the defender tactic with rook to g8. Queen captures the pawn, and we once again remove the defender. Magnus doesn't fall for this, of course, and instead moves his bishop to c3, trying to avoid trades at all costs. Yu defends it with his rook. Magnus develops his rook, lining it up with the king. And Yu plays another completely brilliant move, bishop f4. Now I want you to notice that Magnus is still trying to attack the king here. After all, he's down a piece for 2 pawns. He really does not want the endgame. And in situations like this, you really want your king to be surrounded by your own pieces to defend it. This bishop really wasn't doing much to defend the king over here on h6, so he's simply rerouting it to the e5 square where you can threaten another trade. And if this bishop moves, the pawn hangs. The engine move here is h4, which is insane. Magnus plays the much more reasonable rook d1, getting both of his rooks to the center of the board. And Yu finishes his plan of blockading the pawn and rerouting his bishop to the e5 square. The engine still likes h4, and it's still hilarious. Magnus goes for rook e3. Our pawn is defended twice now. Yu simply moves his rook to the g file, x-raying the king and attacking the queen. Queen f5. Yu creates a monster knight with knight f4. And at this point, Magnus is okay with trading the bishops off. His bishop is objectively worse than ours, and it's really the only way left to try to open up the king. Yu recaptures with his d-pawn. This opens up Yu to some checks, but it's really nothing scary. And here Carlsen plays h4. Too little, too late. In this position, Yu Yangyi could win the game right away with rook takes g2, but instead opts for the much more stylish knight takes g2, rook g3, knight e3. If Magnus recaptures, the rook is hanging with check. The rook is pinned, so the rook can't recapture, and in this position, Magnus Carlsen, the best chess player on earth, resigns. Hope you enjoyed the game. I found it very, very instructional myself. This is why I wanted to share it. And hopefully you remember some of the tips I gave the next time you're playing against an opponent who decides to sacrifice some material to go for a massive attack.